Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited about our time that we're spending today. I'd like to welcome all of you to our Math PD session for grade 5. Like to first of all begin by acknowledging that in Humboldt we are on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis, and you can certainly make that acknowledgement from wherever you are. Horizon School Division spans across Treaty 6 as well as Treaty 4 territory. And with that comes our return commitment to the promises that were made for us by our ancestors in order to be able to share this beautiful land that we live in. I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, that we have Lana Steiner as well as Jackie Bergerman here from our literacy and numeracy team, who will be supporting this, and I'll be spending the afternoon with you as well. A little reminder to maybe mute your mics and your cameras while we're in session, just to save a little bandwidth. We'd hate to have some kind of extra glitch happen. Would encourage you to make sure that you have run off the materials or have the materials accessible that were connected to this event, and also have access to your login with MathUp, as we'll be kind of going through that resource as well. We will be having some breakout rooms. We're going to try that this afternoon and see how much fun we can have with that. It's kind of new for our team to be doing this, so an exciting chance for us to do some collaboration remotely. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our resident expert, who, by the way, just did a national podcast that's going to air in June. So we're kind of excited about that, letting the secret out of the bag a little early, but we're very proud of the work that Lana does. And I learn every time that I have a conversation with her. So I know you're going to have a very rich, great learning experience this afternoon. So over to you, Lana.
Thanks, Catherine. I just need to share here. Okay, let's get going. So good afternoon, everyone. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to do a check-in on a Google Jamboard. So I popped the link in the chat there, or it should be in there. There you go. And you can just go into the Jamboard there and tell me kind of where you're at and how you're feeling today. So when you pop in, this is what you should see. I can see some of you are in there already. And if you want, you can just pull a sticky note over right here and just type your name in there and then hit save, and then move the sticky note to the place or to the image that you feel best represents the mood that you're in today. So if I were doing mine, it would look like this. I'm just gonna, you can just see me. Okay, let me try that again. There, sorry guys. There we go. That's what you should see. Are you seeing my Jamboard? Awesome, good stuff. So in the session with the grade 2s this morning, I said that the upper left-hand corner was you're in a good mood despite the weather, despite COVID, you know, you're in a pretty good place. Your upper left is your upper right is you're tired. Your bottom left is you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with math or your math instruction. And then the one where he has his finger on his chin, he's just kind of questioning what math is, or what math up is, sorry. Maybe he's feeling a bit doubtful. He's kind of unsure. He needs some more information before he knows how he feels or she feels. Yep. Okay, so most people are in a pretty good place. For those of you who are questioning things, please pop your questions into the chat as we work through the session. Jackie's monitoring the chat, so every once in a while I'll stop and I'll check for questions, and I'll try my best to address any that arise. Okay, let's pop over here now. So throughout this presentation, what I've done is we're going to, in the fall, we looked at the provincial holistic rubric and we looked at assessment. And then we talked a little, kind of the way I left that session was, okay, now we need to look at the instruction that will support that type of assessment or what the rubric is asking for. I decided to anchor this session in Math Up because Math Up is the core resource that Horizon School Division has adopted. And so we've used this year as kind of a soft start into it. And then come next fall, this will be the core resource that teachers will be expected to implement and utilize in their classroom. So because that decision has been made, I've embedded a lot of videos from Math Up throughout the presentation. And then what I will do is I'll kind of use those as launching pads and I'll explain things in further detail, or I'll connect them specifically to what's happening in Saskatchewan. So with that being said, let's get going here.
Because Math Up is a digital resource, it's kind of handy that there's certain things that are easier to do. And one of the things that's easier to do is to kind of move things around in a way that makes more sense for you. So Math Up is organized at each grade level by topic, and there are a set of, whether it's 18 or 19 or 20 or 23 or whatever it is, topics in that grade. And they are organized by strands, but we don't think that the right thing to do is to teach like all the number ones and then all the pattern and relational ones and so on. So teachers have to come up with a sequence that they're going to use to get through the year. What we've chosen to do is provide for you 3 paths that made sense to me anyway, that you might go this way, or you might go this way, or you might go this way. And we've tried to give you a little bit of a rationale for those paths. One of the important principles is to honor prerequisites, like there's certain topics you can't do until you've done other ones. One of the important principles is don't start the year with a bad news topic. Start with something happy and fresh. We've often suggested patterning and sometimes measurement, and sometimes it's a number topic, but with not heavy duty numbers, kind of softer numbers. So there are certain principles we adhere to. Some of them have to do with kind of coming back to things. So we don't want all of the things about number clustered together. We want to kind of spread them out, way to spread out patterns and relations and so on. So there's a number of principles that were there that guided the 3 paths we suggested. That said, you're a free agent in the universe, and you might decide to move them another way because you know your kids and what works for you. And so you are totally free to drag and drop and move topics around and find a path that works for you. We're just sharing our principles in case they help you come up with your path. There's also the issue of teachers who have combined grades, and there are many teachers in our country who do have combined grades. And you have the grade 2 stuff you have to teach in the 3, or the 3 and 4, or whatever it is. And you have to figure out a path that takes you through this, but also through this. And one of the things we've tried to do is help you a little. So we've gone through all the combinations, like 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, etc., to try to help you figure out, well, I'm actually saying to you, if it were me teaching, this is what I would do. And one of my principles in the combined path approach is that I want to teach the kids together as much as I can. So I don't want like those kids over there doing something and these kids over here doing something else, and I ignore them for a while and I ignore them for a while. We want to blend them when we can, and I've tried pretty hard to show you how that might look in a couple of topics very specifically, and then you would use those principles when you created your own paths. One of the other things to probably pay attention to is that there are topics which I'm just going to say are more important than other topics in terms of kids moving on to the next grade and those topics being built on and so on. And I would propose that you don't leave those ones for June, because then they never happen. So it seems to me that topics that you think are critical should be revisited a couple of times during the year and not left too late.
Okay, so there's a few things that I'm going to touch on that expand upon that she touched on. So as she said, MathUp is a digital resource. A lot of the really well-developed resources now are digital. There's a lot of reasons for that. For one reason, it's more cost effective because you're not printing actual textbooks. Another really cool thing is that I have a license to MathUp, which gives me access to grades 1 to 6 at this point in time. So if I have a student who's on an IIP or who has significant needs in math, I don't have to go searching elsewhere. I can stay within the same resource and simply jump into a different grade. Another good feature of it is because it's digital, it's constantly being revised. And so when you log into MathUp, it'll take you to the spot where you last left off. But if you go to your dashboard is always telling you what's new within MathUp. And so sometimes you'll notice little tweaks and changes in there. And that's, like I said, that constant revision and refinement that you don't get with a print resource. So essentially, a path is a year plan. If you go into MathUp, here is an example of a path. I'm just going, there's your suggested paths right there, the path A, the path B, the path C. If I wanted to create my own path that she talked about, I would hit edit. And I can, once I hit that edit button, I can go like this. And I can move those around and I can put them wherever I want to put them. So when she was saying that you're a free agent in the universe, that's what she meant, is that ultimately you can drop and drag these topics anywhere you want and order them in any sequence that you want. Once you do that, you hit save. If you choose, regardless of the path that you choose, whether it's one that she has created or one that you've created yourself, you may want to set that as an active path. Once you set it as the active path, it's going to track which lessons you've taught. So that's kind of a nice feature. So we're just going to jump back over here for a second. You will also notice when she was talking about lining up the combined grades. So what you want to do, and you'll see in the combined grade paths, that like the two outcomes on adding in grade 2 and grade 3, she'll align those, because the way the Saskatchewan curriculum is set up is in kindergarten, it's numbers up to 10. Grade 1, it's numbers up to 20. Grade 2, it's 100. Grade 3, it's 1,000. Grade 4, 10,000. Grade 5, up to 100,000. And grade 6, beyond 1 million. And so the magnitude of numbers changes as the children move through the curriculum. The grade level that I'm working at. This isn't always possible, but you want to do it as much as possible. So like she said, you keep your entire group together. When she talked about revisiting topics throughout the year, that's very, very important. Really, the language that's kind of used in the math community is spaced practice. And the reason that you want to have your students engaged in spaced practice is because what happens is we often teach these outcomes in silos in math. And when we assess the kids, they're demonstrating grade level understanding, and that knowledge or that understanding is sitting in their short-term memory. What happens though is if they don't have opportunities to consolidate that knowledge, so to practice it and consolidate it either through real life or the classroom, that knowledge essentially is lost because it doesn't transfer to the long-term memory. So that's why oftentimes in math, there's major issues with retention, and you'll hear kids say, oh, the teacher didn't teach us that last year, when you know the teacher did, you just don't know why it hasn't stuck with the children. And that's why. And so that's why she's talking about revisiting those topics. I would encourage you, especially in grade 5 with division, to very gently introduce that, as slowly as you can throughout the year and just revisit, and then do a deep dive with it where you teach the actual outcome and then revisit, because that's one that kids have a lot of trouble with in grade 5. And it's partly because they only come upon it in grade 4 and in grade 5, and then they move to decimal division in grade 6. In comparison, if you look at addition, they're adding and subtracting in grades 1, 2, 3, 4. And then in grade 5, they transition to addition with decimals. So you can see they're only getting 2 opportunities with it. So that one's really important to spend a lot of time practicing with, because they don't get opportunity to practice with it in the next grade level. Okay, you will also notice over here, if we pop into this, I just want to bring your attention here. These ones, that means Manitoba. So you don't have to worry about that right there, okay? This means BC. You don't have to worry about that. If you see something labeled with WNCP, that stands for Western Northern Canadian Protocol. That is connected to Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is part of the Western Northern Canadian Protocol, so you need to know that. So you don't have to concern yourselves with the BC ones or the Manitoba ones, but you do have to pay attention to the WNCP ones. And while we're on this topic, there are 2 editions of Math Up. And so one of the issues that a lot of teachers have encountered in Horizon is that they're trying to log into the wrong edition. What they're trying to do is they're trying to log into the Ontario edition rather than what's called the National edition. If you're logging into the Ontario edition, you'll get a green screen. It'll be like a mint green. Whereas if you're logging into the National edition, which is the one that you need, it'll be like a light orange or like a peachy color. So just so you know that if you're having trouble logging in and it's telling you that it's not recognizing your email within the system, you're probably in the Ontario edition and not the National one. Okay, and once you get your National one, make sure you bookmark it, because when you Google Math Up login, the Ontario edition always comes up. So we've kind of learned that one the hard way. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here. Now, when Marian presents these paths, embedded in Math Up, there's a rationale attached. So just like she said in the video, you have 3 paths for every grade. And so right here, she's kind of saying, this is my thinking around each of these paths. Okay, so path C, you can see, she says, is more traditional. Path B begins with patternings. So oftentimes with patterns in grade 5, we're working with smaller numbers than what we are in the number strand. So she's telling you, this is what I was thinking when I was creating each of those. So what you want to do is you just kind of want to scroll through this, read through it, and then say, okay, which path best aligns with my thinking? And then you choose that path. If you find that there are parts of each path that you want to take from each one and create your own, that's fine too. But this gives you the background into why each path was created or structured the way that it was. Okay, so what you're going to do now, and we're going to try to put you into breakout rooms for this. I'm going to pop the link for the curriculum website into the chat box. And Catherine sent out with the invitation, there was a PDF that was attached to the invitation, and it had the different paths on it. Use path A. And in your breakout rooms, what you're going to do is you're going to, and you will probably want to have your laptop open as well so that you can actually go into the resource and click on the tabs. I'll show you right here. So if I go in here, I'm going to go into path A. And then I'm going to click on my drop-down menu, and I'm going to pop in here very quickly, and I might be able to tell from just the titles of the lessons right here. Sorry. What outcome this matches in the curriculum, or I might need to actually go into the actual lessons and read a little bit more. But what you're going to do in your breakout rooms is you're going to align each topic with the outcome in the Saskatchewan curriculum.
And will this be a program that all grades will be implementing next year?
All grades from 1 to 6 will be implementing this. You'll notice if you pop on there right now that kindergarten is in there, but that one, they're just tidying it up. And then you'll notice too that grade 7 and 8 is in there. But just a word of caution, grade 7 and 8 that is in there right now, it aligns with Ontario curriculum. So if you went in there, you would notice that, for example, the Pythagorean theorem is in grade 7. Well, in Saskatchewan, we teach that in grade 8. So I think it's done, the 7 and 8 is done for Ontario, but the 7 and 8 is not completely done in the edition that you're working in. So for next year, this will be implemented in grades 1 to 6. Okay, so yes, you're going to go into your breakout rooms and you're going to align each topic with its corresponding outcome in the Saskatchewan curriculum, and I'll pop the link for the curriculum into the chat box.
And I'll just start the breakout sessions right now.
Awesome, yeah, that would be great.
There's a question on, is the link to the national one on the Horizon site? I don't think it is.
You shouldn't be assigned to a breakout session, but Kelsey Magnuson's in one on her own. Do you want to maybe join that one, Lana? I don't know how that happened. Oh, I just moved her into one. So Lana, you just let me know when you want me to end the breakout sessions, and then it gives them 60 minutes or 60 seconds to finish what they're doing when I give them the notice. Can you get your volume going, Lana? I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me, Catherine?
Now I can.
Okay, when I tried to jump into that breakout session, it's booting me out. Well, it's not booting me out. It won't let me get in there, and then it's disconnecting my audio. So it's not just muting me. I can't even hear you when you're talking when I try to get in there, and then it's asking for like video access or something. So I'm not sure what.
Well, I think I have to assign you because I'm the host. So I think
Right.
I can join anyone, but I have to assign you.
Right. And so when I go to, because I think you assigned me to number 8, when I go to join it, it's telling me that there's a video access issue. And then, like I said, it completely cuts my audio off. And
Okay, I'm just going to assign you to a fun little. I'm going to assign you and Jackie to a room.
okay.
So Jack, are you back in the main room now? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me now, Lana?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know what happened with Jillian. I had you in a session. And Michaela, did you just join us?
I did. I got kicked out.
Oh, you got kicked out. Oh, well, you must have been using some profanity because that's the only reason we kick people out. Just kidding. I don't know what happened.
Catherine,
Yes.
so I noticed that you commented on my remark that it does take us to that Ontario link. So how do I get to what I need today?
Okay, so if you'll notice, if you open up your chat and you go
Yes.
about three messages up,
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna get a tattoo.
like bookmark it right now, okay?
Okay, I will.
Yeah,
I see it now. Thank you much.
you bet.
It's that nat.math up, Lana?
Yeah, I'm guessing so.
Okay.
The login button is at the upper right side, and you just click on that, and then it'll take you right to that kind of peachy page, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, and Jill and Michaela, I'm just going to throw you into a session and hopefully that helps. So Lana, just let me know when you want to end the breakout sessions and I can do that.
I think we'll give them, I can't hear what they're saying. So if they're still working, like I'm thinking we should probably 5 to 10 more minutes.
Okay.
I'll make a note in the chat.
Okay, they won't get it in the chat.
Okay.
I don't think so. So I know, Matt, you were in a room. Michelle, I'm not sure if you were. And Annie, did you just join us?
No, Matt, Michelle, and I were all in a group. I
Oh,
think
okay.
we finished what we were supposed to do.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Thank-
worked our way through. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if you, because some people said they got kicked out of their groups.
Oh,
So you just left voluntarily.
yeah. The three of us did. We finished and we weren't sure if we were supposed to stay.
Nope, it's perfect.
All right.
Okay, let's give the rest of the groups then till about 1:15. Okay, Catherine?
Sure. Okay, they should all be returning fairly quick here now.
There, I was muted. Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, let's keep going here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is as a group, we're going to come together and make sure that we all aligned the resource and the curriculum the same way. So we're going to go through, and if you guys want to unmute yourselves when you speak, or we can pop it in the chat or do both, we're going to go through each topic on path A, and we're going to make sure that we have the right outcomes or the correct outcomes, the correct outcome alignment, okay? So I'll do the first one. So for 2D shapes and 3D objects, you should have SS 5.5 and SS 5.6. Is there someone who's willing to tell us, or a group that's willing to tell us what the one about fractions is?
Our group with Matt and Michelle, we thought that representing, comparing, and ordering fractions would be NN 5.5.
Okay. I have what I've done on the next page. So unless someone objects, because I don't have the order of the outcomes memorized completely, let me know. What about the probability one? Does anyone know what the probability outcome is in grade 5?
Hi, this is Matt. My group had SP 5.3.
Yep, that sounds about right. And then representing decimal numbers, we're just going to go down the list there.
I noticed that some people are putting it in the chat as well.
Oh, okay, perfect. I can't see the chat the way I have my screen being shared right now.
N 5.6.
Perfect. And estimating and comparing decimal numbers? Catherine, can you tell me if they're in the chat?
Yeah, there's nothing there yet.
Okay.
N 5.4.
Was that the same? Those two are the same, right? The representing decimal numbers and the estimating and comparing decimal numbers, they should be the same outcome, I believe.
I have for representing. Oh yeah. 5.6, and then oh yeah, they're both 5.6, sorry.
Okay, and then the length and area topic?
SS 5.1 and 5.2.
Yeah, I kind of have them up there now. And then the patterns one is 5.1. And then representing whole numbers. This one is tricky for grade 5. It's partially N 5.1 and it's partially N 5.4. 5.4 is that tricky outcome where it's asking teachers to work with estimation strategies, and 5.4 is embedded in that topic, just so you know. That one is a little bit tricky, where finding 5.4 is a little bit tricky. But if we'll keep going with this, but this is really important to notice too, that if you look at representing decimal numbers and estimating and comparing decimal numbers, those are two separate topics in Math Up, but they're still addressing the same outcome. So then if I look down below and I see length and area, that's one topic, but it's addressing two outcomes. Same with representing whole numbers. It's one topic, but embedded in there are two outcomes. So let's keep going with this to make sure that we are all on the same page. Okay, so this is the bottom half of the page. What I want you to do is just kind of check and make sure that what your group came up with matches what I have right here. And if you have any questions or you're wondering how that came to be, just let me know. So if we go back to this slide, you guys, there's an error in my work right here, and see if you can find where the error is.
Unless I'm mistaken, we're missing N 5.2.
Right. So where did I make the mistake?
That should be in multiplying whole numbers.
Exactly. That's where I made the mistake. Yep. You'll note it doesn't matter which curriculum you look at in Saskatchewan, the N, whether it's like 2.1, 3.1, the 0.1 is always a place value 1. When I looked at that, I was like, I made a mistake. So yeah, that's definitely where the error is. The rest of them are correct though. So my question to you is, why do you guys think that, or why do you believe that I asked you to do this task? If there's something you want to share or your thoughts, just unmute your mic because it's too hard to type this part into the chat box.
I think it's important for us to see how we can kind of intertwine everything throughout the whole year rather than just doing like unit by unit. So like where like you start with like fractions, which go into decimals, but we don't do them in order. We like do something else in between there. I think it's good to do that separation so that we're constantly reviewing the topics throughout the whole year rather than doing like number sense first and then patterns and relationships and then shape and space and then statistics and probability. This way we kind of cross outcome them, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're trying to use the idea of this space practice so that you're constantly looping back to help, because when you revisit and you loop back, it's natural to, okay, what have we done already this year? And then that's helping with that consolidation piece. And so that's why she set that up the way that she has. Why else do you think I asked you to do this?
Is it just to show us that all the outcomes are covered and this isn't new stuff, even though it's a new resource?
That's exactly why. Because this is one of the advantages to a digital resource is that because they can tweak things. Like I said, there's an Ontario version, right? That one's perfectly aligned to Ontario curriculum. This one is perfectly aligned to Saskatchewan curriculum. So in a lot of the more traditional resources, they have kind of a general alignment, but they're not aligned specifically. So when I say that, what I mean is you might be looking at a grade 2 resource and it might be addressing like 2-digit subtraction, but then there might be a unit on time in there. Well, time isn't addressed until grade 4. And so then you're teaching something that you don't need to be teaching, or maybe you're missing teaching something, like lots of them don't have probability, and maybe you're missing that outcome. But when you have these digital resources where they can align the curriculum so tightly, you know that you're covering what you need to be covering as a teacher. And that's super important. If you look down the right-hand side right here, do you see where it says like representing whole numbers? What that means is before I go to teach N5.1, so estimating and comparing whole numbers, I want to have taught the lessons in representing whole numbers. Before I go and teach adding and subtracting whole numbers, I want to teach the representing whole numbers and the estimating and comparing whole numbers. But say then I go to teach data, there's no prerequisites there, so I can teach data whenever I want. So that's what that right-hand column is telling you there. And of course, that right-hand column, it won't change regardless of the path that you choose. It's just how you order it throughout the year. Yep. Yep. Okay, so we're going to keep moving here, if that's okay. If it's not, pop it in the chat. Okay, let's take a look at this video now. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is tight like this, the alignment is perfect. If you go down into this section right here, it tells me exactly what outcome. Of course, in Saskatchewan, we go N 5.3 and 5.4 because of the grade level, but that's telling me my specific outcomes that are connected to Saskatchewan right there. And then you have that as well. Okay, let's watch this video.
Students at this level are asked to continue, I'm going to say reinforce the basic facts that they've already learned for multiplication. And that'll happen as they work with larger numbers and multiply them, but it can also happen as students play games or do other kinds of problems that involve practice using multiplication facts. It is totally true that unless a student has command of the multiplication facts, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to work with larger numbers. So attention to that practice in a variety of meaningful, interesting, not timed too quickly ways would be valuable even at this level. That said, students are going to continue working with multiplying larger numbers. And normally, when you multiply larger numbers, we could give them a whole lot of rules, but we want them to understand what they're doing. So we're going to use lots of models, and we're going to focus in particular on what I'm going to call an area interpretation of multiplication. So what 23 times 5 is, for example, is the area of a rectangle that's 5 by 23. What 23 times 21 is the area of a rectangle that's 23 by 21. And we're going to use those meanings to help us decompose numbers into manageable pieces using facts, but using meaning to make sense of what kinds of answers we get. In order to accomplish that, students have to be able to do fact calculations in their head. They have to be able to multiply by tens in their head. So I need a student to know that 13 times 10 is 130 and y, and 13 times 20 is 13 times 2 tens. So it's 26 tens or 260. So there needs to be, I'm going to call a buildup to multiplying with large numbers by decomposing them into manageable bits and figuring out through particularly area models how to put those manageable bits together to come up with a reasonable product for that multiplication. There is attention to estimation. I believe especially that when we're working with larger numbers, estimation is very critical. So I need a student to understand that if I'm multiplying 19 times 25, that's kind of like 20 times 30, that's kind of like 600. So there's lots of attention to estimation. And even if students are good at procedures for getting answers, we definitely don't want to shortchange the estimation part. There will be problems that students will solve that require multiplication, and in the course of solving those problems, students will use both estimation and those other skills.
Okay, so there's a few things that I want to touch on there. Okay, the first thing is I want to bring attention to these videos. So all throughout Math Up, it doesn't matter what section you go into, there are videos where Marian is talking. And there's probably at least 100, like probably close to 100 in each grade level alone. And I mean, they're very short, they're typically not more than 5 minutes long. But because there's so many, what I have been recommending to teachers is make sure you watch these topic overview ones. Like I said, they're no more than 5 minutes long, but they just kind of give you some background knowledge and a little bit of understanding that you may not have about what you need to know in order to teach this. So I really encourage teachers to spend a few minutes watching these ones. They're very important. Now, she mentioned a few things in this video that are really interesting, and this goes back to a few of the comments that I've already made. So she recommended, you know, I was talking about that knowledge needs to consolidate, and we often see that that knowledge doesn't consolidate when it comes to kids' math facts. Now, when you tie this into the idea of a digital resource, What she was recommending to you as the grade 5 teacher is to go into the grade 3 and 4, go into the grade 3 and 4 lessons, go into those multiplication lessons, and down along the side here, you'll see on every single set of lessons, there'll be supporting games and activities right here. And if you go into the multiplication lessons in grades 3 and 4, you will find multiplication games in there that you can use so that kids can practice their facts. Now, the other thing that she talked about is you don't want to be timing kids when they're doing math facts or when they're doing math in general. And the reason that this is because there's been a significant amount of research on how this creates anxiety for children. And what happens in the brain is when the amygdala starts freaking out, the prefrontal cortex can't do its job and the kids can't do math, right? They can't reason and think logically. And so we don't want to put that unnecessary pressure on kids. That being said, at the other end of the spectrum, if a child is taking an unreasonable amount of time to do something, like it's taking 10 minutes to answer one multiplication question, that's an indicator that something isn't right and you need to dig a little bit deeper. So what happens, the reason why she's encouraging you to spend the time ensuring that those kids have their facts is because what happens in grade 5, when you go to work with larger numbers and you go to solve problems, is too much of the children's mental bandwidth is being spent on figuring out their basic facts, and there's none left then for working with larger numbers and problem solving. And so when you get to a place, when kids get to a place where they have fluency, then they have more bandwidth left to attend to the larger numbers and to attend to the problem solving. So that's why she's encouraging you to do that as well. Now, when she talked about the area model, and talking about multiplying by 10, everything goes back to place value. So oftentimes when you see kids who can't function within the area model, that's connected to place value. When you see kids who don't understand what borrowing is, that's connected to place value. Everything connects back to place value. So that's very, very important. When she talked about that area model, she was talking about, composing and decomposing numbers. So if I'm multiplying 13 by 25 and I'm using the area model and I'm splitting that 13 into 10 and 3 and the 25 into 20 and 5, I'm decomposing those numbers to work with them. It's easier. And then I compose and I put them back together in the end. Now, people who end up doing mental math, they're typically very good at composing and decomposing numbers. That's how they're doing that math so quickly in their brain. And so even though you're doing it in the area model, and then you're going to transition to the algorithm, it's actually the skill that's in the area model that the kids are using if they ever do multiplication mentally. So there's kind of a little bit, the algorithm goes against kind of what kids do, what we as humans do naturally with mental math. Okay. If you're looking at the learning goals don't align well with the outcomes in Saskatchewan. But if I look closer, they align really well with the indicators in the curriculum in Saskatchewan. So if you're wondering if there's a disconnect or misalignment there, if you dig into your indicators, then you will see that there's alignment there. And your learning goals, they're always, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. If I pop into, here, let's go into multiplying whole numbers. Your learning goals will always be, this particular learning goal, they'll always be on your right-hand side right there. And there's usually one learning goal per lesson. So not too much, right? Because the kids can't absorb too much at one time. but it's important to note the alignment there. Okay, so let's keep going here. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is this little section called going back and going forward.
We've provided going back, going forward charts for each topic. The purpose is to help you in a variety of ways. One is to help you be aware of what expectations you might have that students come to you with this knowledge because they met it in an earlier grade, or that students go forward to this topic so that you can think about that as you're instructing them and somewhat prepare them for that topic. It could be useful if you're teaching a split grade. You have a 1-2 split and you want to know what the 1 should do versus what the 2 should do in a particular topic area so that you can teach them somewhat together. And the going back, going forward chart can help you with that.
Okay, so Marian calls it a going back and going forward chart, and we're gonna take a look at it. And you'll notice it shows right here, this is what the kids learned in grade 1, this is what they learned in grade 2, and then here, I want to be in multiplying. I prefer to work in that one. Oops. Right here we will go. Sorry, I got too many tabs open. Okay, so then this tells you what the kids were working on in the previous grade. And I'm in the tab from this morning. There we go. Now in Saskatchewan, what that's called, or in the math community, those are typically referred to as scope and sequence, okay? Sometimes you hear them called progressions or continuums, but the ministry created a scope and sequence document for K-9 in Saskatchewan. And as you kind of look through, this connects to what I was saying earlier. You'll see like kindergarten, they're working with 0 to 10. Grade 1, they're working, estimate quantities to 20, understand whole numbers to 20. And so what she's doing in that going back and going forward is she's saying, okay, in grade 5, if we come down here and we look at multiplication, if we scooch back, here's grade 4, and we can see, and then here's grade 3 right there. And so they have to do up to 5 times 5 in grade 3. And then when they get into grade 4, they can go up to 10. And then they also have to start doing 2-digit by 1-digit. And then in grade 3, grade 5, they're doing a 3 by 1-digit multiplication. So you can kind of see the progression of learning there. Now, the reason that this is a valuable feature of the resource is it allows me to kind of slide as I differentiate. So I tell teachers, when you're thinking about differentiation in math, kind of what I don't want you, for a second, I want you to unlock the idea of an outcome, and I want you to think of a concept. So if I'm teaching the concept of multiplication, I might have students who are working, at the grade 3 level on just their up to 5 times 5. I might have students who are doing grade 4 work and they're doing a 2-digit by a 1-digit. And then I might have my kids that are at grade level that are doing a 3-digit by a 1-digit. And so when I start to think in terms of a concept, and I kind of release the idea of the outcome for a moment, it makes differentiation a lot easier. And it's important to know what exactly is my goal and what am I responsible for? Because, for example, oftentimes if you go into like a middle years classroom, in grade 5, you're only responsible for teaching equivalent fractions. Lots of times you'll see teachers teach more than they need to teach in grade 5 and grade 6 in terms of fractions, and they're not paying attention to the scope and sequence, and they're doing more than they have to. So that's why these documents are really nice. It's like, what should the kids already know, and then where are they going if I need to push or challenge a little bit. And so if you're interested in this document, just let me know and I will get it to you. Okay, let's keep going here. We're going to watch this video on assessment now.
Gathering assessment data is an important part of a teacher's role. So we took that into account as we prepared materials for Math Up. We know that teachers gather assessment data through observations, conversations, and products. So we made reference to those places where you would gather all of that kind of data. We attended to what are commonly called the 3 parts of assessment. There is assessment for learning, which is to inform instruction. There is assessment as learning, where students learn to assess themselves, monitor themselves to help them become better at learning. An assessment of learning, where teachers are gathering data in order to report somehow, whether to a parent or to the system, how students are doing. So all of those things are attended to in a variety of ways. In particular, when looking at the topic planning pages and at the lesson planning pages, there is specific attention to assessment that you might look at as you're getting ready to do a topic or to do a lesson. And of course, you will see in every topic the section of the topic on the dashboard called Assessment of Learning, which includes much of this data.
Okay, so what I want to do right now is I just want us, before I dive into this assessment piece a little bit more, I just want you to kind of reflect on how I've structured the webinar so far. And I just kind of want someone in the chat to note, like, what are the topics that we've gone over, and why do you think those topics have come first? Okay, so what was our first activity that we did in the breakout rooms?
Our first activity was aligning, right?
Yeah, and so what were we aligning there?
Math Up to the curriculum.
Right, so we took our curriculum. Where are we going now?
Assessment. How are we gonna know that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing with those curricular outcomes and Math Up?
Exactly. So we start with what are we supposed to teach, and then we kind of unpack those outcomes, okay? So assessment, and I'm just going to show you right here. So this is essentially the program and the resources. I don't like the word program. The resources that essentially, modeling backward design. So we started with the curriculum. Now we're looking at assessment. I really like these assessment tools. They're from Christ the Teacher. And if you pop down to grade 5, I can share this link later if you want it to. But they do a really nice job of unpacking outcomes. So then what happens here is all they've done is a group of teachers came together and they said, these are the indicators that we feel best demonstrate this understanding of this particular outcome. But what it does as a teacher is, you know how there's the learning goals in Math Up? Each one of these is something that I want to be teaching, right? And level, and so then it drives your teaching deeper. It really makes you think about, have I spent time teaching that indicator? Have I spent time teaching this indicator? And so you can see how your assessment and your instruction start to go hand in hand, right? So you have your curriculum, then you have your assessment, and then you have your instruction. But when you just look at the outcome, you kind of have a broad understanding of the outcome. But when you start to look at the indicators, you get a really a deeper understanding of what that outcome is actually asking you to teach. And so in Math Up, like I said, the learning goals and the indicators within the curriculum, they line up really nicely. So they match pretty well. And then in terms of this rubric, the indicators all come from the curriculum. So there's always alignment between these different tools. Okay. So the other thing that she mentioned in there was she talked a lot about using conversations, observations, and product. And so we had talked about this in the fall workshop as well, that there are documentation tools that align with, that I've created that align with all of the outcomes in Saskatchewan, and they have the indicators within them. And if that's something that you're interested in too, let me know. Because when you look at the difference between formative and summative assessment, so formative is assessment for learning and summative is assessment of learning. Your formative is, the difference between your formative and your summative is, one of the differences is your audience. So my formative assessment is for me, the teacher. It informs my instruction. Whereas summative assessment, I'm sharing that with a broader audience. It might be parents in terms of report cards. It might be the ministry if I'm having to submit data. It might be the division. And my summative assessment has some type of timeline or time parameter attached to it. So we report 3 times a year to parents. We maybe report once a year to the ministry. And so the strategies that I'm using for formative assessment, I can use those in my summative assessment as well. I just need to be documenting them. Okay, so let's take a look at this.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
There's a person asking, Pauline's asking about, can we open up Math Up in more than one device? She can currently open up at one device at a time.
I'm honestly not sure. I can send an email and ask.
Can I have to look into that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never had a teacher ask me that yet.
But Jackie, I responded to that, I thought, twice, and I don't think my chat's going through. So the question is, you'd like your EA to also use Math Up for a particular student who may be at a different level. And so what I am suggesting is, rather than that student working online from a device, that you select the materials for your EA to use with this student. Likely this would be a space practice because we don't have our EAs, teaching students, of course. So you would have to select the materials that you need, and then under your direction, have the EA utilize those materials rather than logging onto your same device or your same login. Did that make sense?
Many teachers in Ontario are working hard to teach what have been named 3-part lessons. 3-part lessons are intended to accomplish a new way of looking at math, where students are doing a lot more of the thinking rather than just listening. I think what we should be addressing is mostly what the parts are really accomplishing, why the parts are there. So we use names for the parts that are shared by many people, although there are different names. The Minds On, or the Getting Started that some people might call it, we called it Minds On, is a way to get a student into the lesson. It is meant to be engaging. Sometimes it helps a teacher figure out where the student is. Sometimes it helps a student get ready for the main problem he or she is going to. The big part of the lesson, or a big part of the lesson, is the second part, which we call the action. Students are presented with a problem. They often work with other students, although that is always at the discretion of the teacher, to figure something out that the teacher will actually use in the third part of the lesson, the consolidation, to bring out the lesson goal, the essential understandings that that lesson was designed to bring out. So in the action, when the students are working, they normally will have a problem to solve. They often will work together. That problem will be selected and was selected in order to help the teacher bring out in the consolidation the essential understanding and the lesson goal. The consolidation will look different than what some teachers are used to. In this particular case, the consolidation is not just the sharing of work. What it is both sharing of work in a variety of different ways, but it's also pulling the ideas that are meant to be the thrust of the lesson out of the work that the students did. And because the focus is on the ideas, it makes sense that a teacher could pre-plan questions to ask the students to make sure those ideas emerged. What we have provided in the consolidation are those pre-planned lessons, as well as suggestions for sharing, to help teachers who frequently tell me they're not sure what kind of question they need to be asking at the end of the lesson to bring out those ideas. What you'll also notice when you go to a lesson is a fourth part. So let me talk about the fourth part. We called it your turn. It's a way for a teacher to see, did this idea work? Did the student get the idea? So it's an opportunity for a student to answer a few questions that will provide assessment for learning information for the teachers to say, yes, he or she is getting it, or, oh dear, we have to go back to something.
Okay, so what's this graphic that I have on the screen right now? It comes from Saskatoon Public, and so it ironically lines up with Math Up really nicely. So if I look at this circle right here, you can see there's this Minds On section, and then there's the lesson. Now, what I'm noticing when I'm modeling lessons is the Minds On is often taking a little bit longer than 5 to 10 minutes. So just like I tell teachers when they're doing number talks or math talks, put the timer on your phone and set it for 10 minutes. Part of the other thing that I'm noticed, because kids aren't used to learning math in such an open-ended way, sometimes it takes them a while to get used to it. I've also noticed kids in the middle years, more in the middle years than in the primary grades, especially kids who are at grade level and they really like the rules and the procedures and they like to do math quickly. They don't like open-ended questions. So you might see them shut down a little bit in the beginning, or they might not enjoy it in the beginning, and that's okay. That's a reflection of the learning experiences that they've had, but just know that that's something that might happen and that that's typical and it's okay, and over time they will adjust. And kind of once they kind of realize it's open-ended and they kind of need to think about things themselves, and that some rules and some steps and procedures just aren't going to be handed to them, they'll engage and they'll come up with great things. The Minds On, there, like I said, it's typically very open-ended, and so that's so that there's low risk, so that those kids who are a little bit more hesitant to become involved, they start to engage. In the lesson part, you'll notice, so that's the action part of the lesson. It's, if you go in there, it's literally scripted for you. It tells you what questions to ask, what to say. It tells you what questions you might have to ask based on what the kids are doing. But it doesn't tell you it's telling you what questions to ask, but it's not telling you how to teach the kids, because what it wants the kids to do is it wants the kids, through the use of the manipulatives and the visuals provided, to try to create some meaning on their own. And then the teacher tries to build upon that meaning by asking questions and pointing out certain things. And then when you move into the consolidate, what you're trying to do is, for example, if you were teaching multiplication, and let's say you were doing something with, you had a group of kids during the action part and they were working with base 10 blocks. And then you had a student or a couple of students working with the area model. And then you had a student working with the algorithm. And you're noticing there's multiple ways of solving this one problem. And in that consolidation piece, you want all of those strategies or models to be shared so that other kids can see how other kids are solving it. But it's your job as the teacher to be sequencing those strategies from least efficient to most efficient. So you want to say to the student who's working with the base 10s, hey, do you notice it takes less time and less space to work with the area model? And then you say to the child who's working with the area model, when they've been exposed to the algorithm by another student, you know, what is the same? What is different? How can you take what you know about the area model and apply it to the algorithm? Why do we say the algorithm is the most efficient? And you have some really rich conversations around efficiency. That's super important. One of the things that you'll notice when you look at this model is half of the circle is spent on mathematicians' learning time. And so one of the things, and I'll show you how MathUp supports it in a minute, but one of the things that I'm encouraging teachers to do is, after the consolidate part, you probably want to embed some small group instruction in there. So you want to know, even though you've seen in the consolidation kind of how that lesson has landed, you want to get an even, what you want to do in your small group is kind of nudge your learners along that have similar needs. And so I highly recommend putting small group instruction in between your consolidation and your turn. And if you look on this graphic right here, you'll notice that this mathematician's learning time, it takes up the majority of the graphic. And so your small group instruction should be taking up the majority of your time. And so your lesson where you're actually maybe teaching, that's taking up about a quarter of your time. And the your turn part, it's the more traditional part of the resource. So that's where you're going to find some some things in there come in links. You always have the option of a link, which you can put in Google Classroom, or projecting it, or PDF or Word. So you can print stuff off, you can put the link in your Google Classroom, and that's where you'll find like your more typical assignments. So if we just pop over here, we'll go into your turn. There's the, if I wanted to put the link in my Google Classroom, that's where it would be. If I wanted a Word document, it's right here. If I wanted a PDF, it's right here. And if I wanted to project it, it's right here. And when I scroll down, I can hide or show any question that's there. So if I think that there's something unsuitable for a particular student, I can just turn that off or hide it. And then when I go to project it, that will be hidden as well. So these are the questions right here. And then it tells you right there. That would be another practice part or assessment part for the students. So in the your turn is kind of where you have your more traditional textbook features. Now, oops. I just want to scooch back to this lesson or this video right here is a really good lesson or video too. I'm just going to share this one with you. It's about the navigating the 3-part lesson. And even though it talks about grades 1 and 2, there's some important features in, or sorry, we'll pop down to the grade 3-6 one there.
How to navigate a 3-part lesson in grades 3 to 6. Today, let's talk about how to navigate a 3-part lesson in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. As you may remember from our video on how to navigate a topic, there are between 2 and 6 3-part lessons in each topic in Math Up. In the grade 4 patterns topic, for example, there are 5 lessons. Once you've opened a lesson, you'll see the lesson navigation bar under the lesson's title. The lesson navigation bar allows you to easily move through a lesson by clicking on the name of the part you wish to access. There is a planning page followed by the Minds On, Action, and Consolidate parts. Your turn is a 4th part that provides opportunities for individual or groups of students to practice and apply their learning. Notice that the Lesson Part tab turns color so you know where you are. Now let's take a look at each part of a lesson. First, we have the Lesson Planning page, which features a projectable and shareable student learning goal, as well as detailed curriculum information and an overview of assessment opportunities. In this lesson sidebar, you'll find a place to add your own personal notes, the learning goal in teacher language, a link to the success criteria page, a link to the Sum It Up page, a list of materials and tools, including links to reproducible pages, and a link to games and puzzles, including digital games related to this lesson. Now let's open the Minds On part of the lesson. Minds On is usually an open question intended to activate prior knowledge, engage student thinking, and prepare students for the main action task.
Okay, so we watched that part about the 3-part lesson earlier, so I'm not going to spend any more time watching the rest of that video, but it kind of shows you along the side there some of the features that we're going to touch on in a few moments. And it kind of gives you a nice overview of how to use it in grades 3 to 6. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we kind of talked a little bit about, we started diving into the idea of small group instruction a little bit. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to watch this video that's just, less than 2 minutes about the supporting activities. And that video that we just watched, it was showing how the supporting video activities are along the right-hand side. We're going to talk and explore next about how we can use those supporting activities to support our small group instruction.
For each grade 1 and 2 lesson, we've chosen to provide you with a number of supplementary activities that you can use. One of the activities is essentially an assessment for a learning activity, just to make sure everyone is where you think they are. One of them is what we'll call a reteaching activity to help strugglers who didn't quite get it through the first run through. But many of the other ones have different purposes. So there's a number of teacher-led activities.
Okay, so I'm going to cut that one short because that one is specific to grade 1, 2, and that part of the resource is more robust, but it's the same idea here. Just let me jump back into my Math Up. What I'm going to do is I come down along here and I go into this games and puzzles piece here. And when I go into there, it opens it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit multiplying whole numbers because that's what I've chosen up here. And then you'll see right here, there's a link so you can pop these all into Google Classroom. Someone was asked, and I've had this question a few times about students logging on. This is a teacher resource, so you don't set up student accounts like in Mathletic or Prodigy. You put this link in the Google Classroom and then they access it through that. That being said, it's not tracking any data then, okay? So you can use all of these. So when you have students in a small group instruction model and you need your other students to be doing different things, you can be using these supporting games and activities in here to support your small group. So you can use a game as a station. This is really nice now, especially during COVID, because the kids can still do these at their desk, right? And they don't have to be working in pairs or in a group to do that. So that's what that is, and you can use that to support your small group instruction. I can also scooch over to the activities part right here. And I can come down and I can choose cross-strand tasks. Cross-strand tasks, they always have multiple outcomes embedded in them. So and it'll tell you right here, these are like this one, for example, you're working with data and you're multiplying whole numbers. This one you're using fractions and length and area. So you could use those in your stations. That's super important. Now, if I'm working with a student in small group, I just need to get back to the right spot here. And I go to the action part of my lesson. Okay, so when you go to the bottom of the action part of your lessons, and this might be really important when you're doing your small group instruction, you'll notice, and this is in every single lesson, there's suggestions about how to differentiate. So there's always a suggestion about how you could slide down if you need it to go to the grade below. And then there's always a suggestion about how you could challenge students. So it's really nice because you can stay in the same resource and you can still differentiate, and you're achieving your differentiation and it's not draining you, right? Because differentiation can be challenging for teachers. So the resource has done this for you. It's right here. Now, the strong resources, what they're doing is they're building capacity in teachers by showing teachers how to differentiate. The other thing that they're doing is this, what could you do if? Now, in the really strong resources right now, like Mathology, Math Up, and Knowledge Hook, they have this, what could you do if? In the math community, we call them common misconceptions. So this is like, if you're seeing the student do this, respond this way. So they given you, the student is unable to do this, try doing this, try doing this, try doing this. So that if you don't have a deep understanding of math, the resource is there to help you respond to where children are at. So these two pieces are really, really strong part of this resource. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we've taken a look at, I want to share this with you too. So if you pop into and I'll put this link in the chat in a minute. If you pop into Blackboard, because one of the things that people have been saying is we need a little bit more practice for the kids in Math Up. If you come into Blackboard, Blackboard's done a really nice job of creating some sample practice or assessment questions for kids. And these are what they look like at the grade 5 level. And they're all in Word, so you can change them if you need to, or edit them, or do whatever you need to do. They always start with this little blurb, and then the outcomes and the indicators, and then they have some really nice questions. What's nice about the ones in Blackboard, and I think they match up really nicely with Math Up, is that there are lots of visuals in them. So there's really nice alignment there between the resource and what's in Blackboard right now. And of course, what's in Blackboard is aligned with the ministry, so it's wonderful. So there's an extra resource for you guys. And I will just take that and put it in the chat right now too. Okay. Okay, so last video.
When I have the opportunity to talk to teachers about assessment, often they are thinking about what we refer to now as assessment of learning. This is about gathering data that you might use to report to parents or to the system or to give a level or to give a mark. So this is usually summative. After students have learned something, you want to say, hey, did they learn it? As opposed to assessment for learning, where you're looking at things that might change your instruction. When you look at assessment of learning, there are different ways to gather that data. Sometimes it's through observations. So you might observe students and you might use our observational checklist to help you decide what to observe and keep records of some action that a student took or some words that a student said, and that might be part of your assessment of learning data. You also will have conversations with students, and those conversations will help you as well. Again, you don't have to keep a record of everything, but if there's something substantial, you might want to keep a little record, a little notation on this day, this happened, so that you can remember what happened and to have that as a piece of your data. As well, we have what is commonly called products. So students, it may be paper, but it may not be paper. It still might be a discussion. It might be a photograph. It might be all kinds of things. But it's a product that reminds you of what a student actually did. We've decided in Math Up to create things that we call skill questions and things that we call concept questions. And we've differentiated them because they are different. So math has a skill element to it, and we want to know if students have accomplished those skills, and we ask questions to find that out. For many topics, we also have something that we call a performance task. And the performance task is a single task that we think encapsulates a fair bit of the learning in the topic. It's not just one little piece of the topic. There are a few topics without such tasks because they just didn't feel right for those topics. But many of the topics will have that performance task. No teacher has to use all those pieces. Those pieces are there for teachers to select from to gather this assessment of learning data. One of the interesting things I think in Math Up is the use of parallel assessments. It's interesting to me that when a teacher gathers data about a student for the purposes of reporting, and perhaps students struggle with something, they might struggle for different reasons. They might struggle just because the numbers the teacher selected or the shape the teacher selected was a less comfortable or less familiar one, but they really did have the idea. Just in case that you want to know that, there are often parallel assessments, not always, which measure the same kind of ideas, but they measure them in a simpler way. So you can find out what the problems really are. Is it the details or is it the big pieces that students are missing? So that use of parallel assessments might be new and interesting to some of you. Often when we gather assessment of learning data, let's say we gathered it in October, and then we don't revisit that topic for a while or maybe even ever in that year. But all of a sudden in April, we actually, for some reason, see the kid actually knows this stuff now, even though they struggled with it in October. Many assessment experts would encourage you to ignore that October data and reassess that student, or perhaps you've actually already reassessed through observation and conversation, and use what we call the most recent and most consistent data to say, hey, this student really has accomplished this.
Okay, so there's a few things that I want to touch on in that video. So once again, Marion looped back to the importance of using conversations, observations, and products, or the triangulation of data. And I think when between the tools that I shared with you in the fall when we were looking at the provincial holistic rubric, where you could document your conversations and observations, and the assessment tools or on Blackboard and the assessments within Math Up, you should be covered in terms of your assessments. I'm just going to pop over here now. And I'm going to scooch back to grade 5. Let's go into multiplying whole numbers. So there's that your turn piece at the end of every single lesson. The last video was talking about this assessment for learning. So at the end of a series of lessons, there's an assessment of learning. So if I click on that, there's this overview piece, which I can read about, where it talks about, you know, this is the curriculum content. What are you really wanting to see children do? If I go into this assessing skills and concepts, like she said, she's broken everything. All of her assessments of learning, they have an assessing skills and then an assessing concepts part. Now, what she's really doing there is she's assessing procedural fluency, and then she's assessing conceptual understanding. So procedural fluency is kind of knowing the rules or the steps or the procedures. Conceptual understanding is knowing why or how they work. So she's broken that apart in each of these sections. Now, when I'm teaching, oftentimes what happens in the math classroom is we teach procedurally and we don't allow children to develop conceptual understanding. And so what we want to do is we want to develop the conceptual understanding, because that's what leads to procedural fluency. If the kids have the conceptual understanding, there's a greater chance of retention there, because they understand the steps and they understand their purpose, rather than if I just give them the steps or the rules or the procedures, they'll keep, like I said, they'll keep those in their short-term memory, and then they'll lose them after they're done working with them and you move on. So that's why that section is split into those two different pieces there. Here's the parallel assessment that she was talking about. So this links back to that differentiation piece that I was showing you in the action part. So here, this is like, okay, if I'm in grade 5 and I'm doing multiplication, this is a softer assessment where it's probably like you can see right here, you know, they're working with smaller numbers, because in grade 5, you're supposed to be doing, you know, 1-digit by 3-digit multiplication. So you, once again, you don't have to think about your differentiation. It's there for you. And then here's the performance task that she was speaking of. And so what you're having students do in a performance task is apply their understanding or their knowledge and skills to a new and novel situation. And so if you just scroll down there, there's the task right there. Once again, you could put it in their Google Classroom. You could print it off in either Word or a PDF, or you could project it onto your smartboard. So that's what's going on there. You will notice in all of her action pieces, like if we scroll down here and we look at this, it shows you sample answers. You'll see this all throughout the resource, but if you go to project it, that won't show up. So the kids aren't going to see the answers. Just in case you're worried about that, that won't happen. It clears them away. Okay. So one of the things, probably the most daunting thing about this resource is just how large it is. And it's going, in all honesty, it'll take you a while to like learn how to navigate it, because there's even times where I go in and I thought something was in a certain spot and I'm like, nope, it's in that other spot. That's very common with digital resources. It's just part of the learning curve, and it's a navigation thing. All you do is you spend time in the resource and it'll come with time. And with that being said, that's kind of, we're getting to the end of the session now. Jackie's telling me there's a question. That's a Catherine question.
Okay, I can answer that question. Will the Horizon assessment still be used? So you are welcome to use the Horizon assessments. What I would encourage you to do is take a look also on Blackboard, because the Horizon assessments, math assessments, were based on the common math assessments that were the provincial math assessments, and the ministry has upgraded those assessments on Blackboard, and so there's some additional materials that align with those as well. So what we are not going to be doing is using the Horizon assessments as the holistic mark. So I think the practice in the past has been that we use the Horizon assessment, common assessments, and that becomes the mark that is reported to the ministry, because we are reporting on the holistic rubric, which Lana has very deftly gone through with us. And so the Horizon assessments can still be used as part of your assessment portfolio of things that you would like to have informing your assessment practices. So as Lana talked about the triangulation of evidence, what are the multiple pieces of evidence that you are using that will inform that holistic mark that you are submitting? So if the Horizon common assessments work for you and they are part of your assessment package, then by all means, you're certainly welcome to also include them. We are not reporting on those assessment tools solely. So the holistic assessment mark will be a combination of the assessment tools that you develop collaboratively with your school, with your team, and the resources within this Math Up resource when you're looking at some project-based assessments, observations, all the pieces that inform whether or not your students are meeting the outcomes. So I hope that answers your question. We're not disbanding the Horizon assessments. We're not saying don't use them. We're just not using them solely as part of our assessment protocol. And have I said that correctly, Lana?
Yeah, I think kind of when I think of them, I think they're one piece of the puzzle. I don't think they're the entire puzzle.
Yeah, that
what kind of how I explain it.
What she said is better than what I said. So I'm trying to communicate that exactly that. As we have talked about, you know, what is the best way for children to be able to demonstrate what they know and how they know it. Again, it's like Lana's amazing questions. How do you know? And tell me more, so that we dig in deeper than just one common assessment to say, here's how we know. We're using multiple sources of evidence.
Kind of, there's that piece too where Marian talks about, you know, what am I consistently seeing, right? And if I have a piece of my data that's an anomaly, I'm probably going to set that piece aside. But if I'm looking for consistency, and when I'm looking for that consistency, I'm looking for my data to get saturated so that I'm seeing the same thing over and over again. When you're doing observations, and you can even observe kids like doing like an algorithm, right, on a whiteboard. But when you observe them, what you want to see typically is 4 or 5 questions. If they do 4 or 5 questions procedurally, then you pretty much know if they have it or not. And that's kind of the magic number right there. If there's an indicator that's saying that they need to explain something, you only need to hear the explanation once, because that's clearly like, you know, a more involved answer. But when you're looking at more procedural type things, you want to see them 4 to 5 times. They don't need to do it 20 times in a row.
So people are often asking whether this is a virtual resource or a print resource. This is not a jump math or a Mathletics replacement. This is a core resource, which is versatile enough to be able to use virtually, so that if we happen to be in a situation, which many of us have found ourselves in, where we're learning from home tomorrow, there are some resources that you could send out electronically in a virtual environment, but it's also intended to be a physical environment space where you utilize the manipulatives that you have in your classroom, where you can, you know, run off the paper if you choose to use it that way. But we just want to ensure that you understand this is a core resource. It's not an online resource. It's not a, you know, stick your kids on a computer and let them do some virtual practice with it. There are games and things included in it, but that's not the sole purpose of this resource. I hope that makes sense.
Kind of when you look at the action part, lots of resources will tell you what to teach, and then they'll give you questions for students to practice. When you look at the action part of this, this is telling you how to teach. So it's giving you the models, it's giving you the manipulatives, it's giving you the representations that kids need to be seeing, because the reason why it wants kids making meaning, and the reason that the kids are making meaning, they're using models, and that they're using lots of conversation, like you're asking lots of questions instead of just telling them, is I want 3 parts of the children's brain to light up. I want the visual part of their brain to light up, I want the language part, and I want the symbolic or the number part. Because when I get all 3 of those tracks running, then there's a greater chance of retention and understanding. And so the thought behind this resource is deep. It's backed by a ton of research. And when, like I said, when you're looking at the high quality resources right now, they're not just thinking about what are the students doing. They're thinking, how can we build capacity in teachers? How can we make teachers better? So it doesn't matter if you look at, like I said, Math Up, Mathology, or Knowledge Hook. They're teaching teachers about common misconceptions. They're teaching teachers how to differentiate, and they're trying to build teachers' own conceptual knowledge in math. So when we were looking at this resource, we were looking at those aspects of it. And like I said, that's what the high quality resources are bringing to the table nowadays. Are there kind of what I've spent some time doing after I've done some virtual tours of Math Up with staffs, and then afterwards I've always offered to come out and model lessons. And for some teachers really like that, because then they can see it in action, and it takes something that is a little bit abstract and it makes it more concrete. So if that's something that you're interested in, just send me an email and I'm more than willing to do that. The only thing that I ask is, once we set a date, you tell me what your kids are working on so that I choose a lesson that's appropriate for what they're doing, and it's not just a random lesson. And that if I need any manipulatives, that you kind of find them in your building for me. That's all that I ask. So if you want that, just send me an email. As Catherine mentioned, this is a core resource, and we talked about that. If you're interested in the scope and sequence document, the ministry one, just let me know. If you're interested in those rubrics that kind of break down the outcomes so that you really know what you need to be teaching in each outcome, let me know about that as well. If you want the link to Blackboard sent directly to you, let me know. I'll do that as well. Anything you need, just ask and I'll try my best to get it for you. So with that being said,
Can you ask Jill to tell us her last name and which school she's at?
I was asked to ask Jill her last name and what school she's at. If you could pop that in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated, because then Jackie will be able to see it. Okay. So last call for questions. Did you see it there? It popped up. Thanks, Jill. We appreciate that. Okay, so I always tell everyone to it takes time to integrate new knowledge and new understanding. So if something pops up a day from tomorrow or 3 days from now or a week from now, and it's not making sense to you, or you need some clarification, feel free to loop back to me. That makes total sense. And don't ever hesitate. And with that being said, if you want to log off, feel free to log off, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today. And thank you, Lana and Jackie. Appreciate your presentation and all of the learning that I took away from this. And thank you, everyone, for your great questions.